Have you ever built a castle on someone else's promise? Have you ever looked at your life, at your own hands, and seen them not as your own, but as tools to build someone else's dream? I did. My name is Elena, and this is the story of how I built an empire for the man I loved, only to have him lock me out of the gates. And it's the story of how, years later, I returned to burn those very gates to the ground. It all started in a tiny, one-room apartment that always smelled of damp carpet and ambition. The walls were thin, and our dreams had to be quiet, whispered after dark so the neighbors wouldn't hear. My husband, Leo, was a storm of ideas, a man with a mind for business and a heart that I believed was made entirely for me. He would pace that small room, his eyes shining, talking about algorithms, market disruption, a company that would change the world. And me? I was the anchor, the steady hand. While he dreamed of the stars, I made sure we had enough money to eat. I worked 2 jobs, a waitress by day and a data entry clerk by night. My fingers would ache, my feet would swell, but I'd come home, see the fire in his eyes, and every ache felt like an investment into us, into our future. I remember one night, particularly cold. The heater was broken. We were huddled under a blanket, sharing a single cup of cheap instant noodles. Leo looked at me, his face etched with a guilt that broke my heart. "Elena," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, "I'm going to make it. I swear to you. All this sacrifice, I'm going to pay you back 1,000 times over. The company, I'll call it Aethelgard. It means noble protector, because that's what you are. You are my protector, my partner. Everything I build, it's for you. It's for us. Can you hear it? The sweetness of that poison? Noble protector. It sounds so romantic, doesn't it? But what it really meant was that I was the one doing the protecting, the sacrificing, while he got to be the noble dreamer. So I sacrificed more. I didn't buy new clothes for 5 years. I cut my own hair. I used every spare penny to pay for his business certifications, his networking events, the secondhand laptop he coded on until dawn. I was his silent partner, his unpaid CFO, his emotional support system, his cheerleader. I believed in Leo so fiercely, I forgot to believe in myself. The day he got his first investor was the day I quit my second job. We celebrated with a bottle of sparkling cider, dancing in that tiny, damp apartment. It felt like the sun had finally broken through the clouds. Aethelgard was born, and I was its mother. The company grew, slowly at first, then all at once like a wildfire. We moved from the apartment to a small house, then to a penthouse with a view of the entire city. Leo's name started appearing in magazines. He was the wunderkind, the visionary, and I became the wife in the background, the one who planned the charity galas, who smiled for the cameras, who made sure his life ran smoothly so he could conquer the world. People would ask me, "Elena, what do you do?" And my answer was always, "I support my husband." It was a title I wore with pride. But slowly, so slowly, I almost didn't notice, the distance between us began to grow. He was flying to Tokyo, to New York, to Paris. I was home, in our silent, spotless penthouse, surrounded by expensive things that felt as hollow as my heart was becoming. He started coming home later. His phone, which used to buzz with my messages, was now filled with notifications from a new assistant, Isabella. Young, brilliant, ambitious Isabella. He talked about her constantly. Isabella secured the deal. Isabella's presentation was flawless. Isabella understands the vision. A cold, sharp sliver of ice began to form in my chest, but I ignored it. I was the noble protector, the foundation. He loved me. He had built this for us. Oh, how foolish we can be when we don't want to see the truth staring us right in the face. The end of my old life didn't come with a bang. It came on a Tuesday afternoon. I had decided to surprise Leo at the office with lunch. I wore the dress he always said he loved. I brought his favorite meal from the little deli we used to go to when we were broke. I walked into the gleaming tower of Ethelgard, a building I had never truly felt I belonged in. I walked towards his office, the employees smiling at me with a strange, pitying look in their eyes that I couldn't quite decipher. And then I saw it, through the slightly ajar door of his private office. Leo. My Leo. The man the dreams I had fed with my own youth. He wasn't alone. Isabella was there. And he wasn't just talking to her. He was holding her. His hand was cupping her face, his thumb stroking her cheek, his eyes filled with an adoration I hadn't seen in years. He was looking at her the way he used to look at me in that tiny, damp apartment. The world stopped. The sounds of the office faded into a dull roar. The paper bag containing our lunch slipped from my numb fingers, hitting the polished marble floor with a soft, pathetic thud. Both of them turned. Leo's face didn't register shock or guilt. It registered annoyance, as if I were a fly that had buzzed in at an inconvenient time. "Alina," he said, his voice cold and flat, "this isn't what you think." But it was. It was exactly what I thought. It was what every neglected wife, every sacrificed partner fears in the deepest, darkest corner of their heart. The betrayal wasn't in the kiss I didn't quite see. The betrayal was in his eyes. The man I had built, the empire I had helped create, looked at me as if I were a stranger, a ghost of a past he was desperate to forget. And in that moment, standing in the hallway of the empire I helped build, with the ruins of our lunch at my feet, I knew. The foundation of my life had just crumbled into dust, and I was about to be buried in the rubble. What do you do when the person you trusted the most in the world becomes the source of your deepest pain? Do you break, or do you, piece by shattered piece, begin to build something new, something far more dangerous? For me, the answer was just beginning to form in the ashes of my heart. The abandoned wife was about to learn how to fight back. There is a special kind of silence that follows a cataclysm. It's not peaceful, it's deafening. It's the sound of your entire world rearranging itself into a shape you no longer recognize. The drive home from Leo's office that day was wrapped in that silence. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just existed, a ghost in the shell of my own life. The confrontation, when it came, was worse than I could have imagined. It wasn't a fight, it was a dismissal. Leo came home that night not with apologies, but with a portfolio. "Yelena," he began, his voice all business, "let's be practical. What we had, it's run its course. We're different people now. You belong to a different time in my life." Each word was a hammer blow. Practical, run its course, different people. He spoke of our marriage, our shared struggle, our love, as if it were a business contract that was no longer profitable. "And Isabella?" I asked, my voice a fragile thread. A faint, smug smile touched his lips. "Isabella is the future. She's my equal. She challenges me. She understands the world I live in now." My equal. Those two words shattered what was left of me. For 10 years, I had believed I was his equal, his partner. Now I was being told I was merely part of the scaffolding to be taken down once the building was complete. He slid the portfolio across the glass dining table, a table I had chosen in a house I had made a home. "This is more than generous. You'll have the house in the Hamptons, a monthly allowance. You'll be comfortable." Comfortable. He was offering me a gilded cage, a life of quiet irrelevance, while he and his equal built our dynasty, our Aethelgard. I looked at the papers, I looked at the man I had loved, and for the first time, I saw not the ambitious dreamer, but a coward. A man so insecure he had to discard the one person who remembered him when he had nothing, just to prove to himself he was someone new. I didn't sign. Not then. I took the portfolio, my hands steady, my heart a block of ice. I went through the motions of the divorce like a sleepwalker. My lawyers were polite, his were ruthless. They spoke of irreconcilable differences, of moving forward. They painted a picture of a wife who had been a supportive partner, yes, but who had no real stake in the intellectual property, the core of Aethelgard. I was sidelined, negotiated out of my own life. The final settlement was, as Leo promised, generous by most standards. A lump sum that would keep me idle for life, several properties. But it was a pittance compared to the empire. More importantly, it came with a condition. A strict non-disclosure agreement. I was to never speak of the company's early days, of my contributions, or the betrayal. I was to vanish silently. I remember the day I moved out of the penthouse. The movers were taking the last of my boxes, the things that were legally mine. Leo was there, with Isabella. She was standing in my living room, pointing to a wall, saying, "I think we should put a modern art piece here, Leo, something bold." She was redecorating my life, erasing me. Leo handed me a final check, a look of pitying finality on his face. "I hope you find happiness, Yelena. I truly do." That was the last straw, the condescension, the absolute, utter demolition of everything we had been. I took the check. I looked him dead in the eye, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something other than pain. It was a cold, sharp, focused anger. "Happiness isn't what I'm looking for, Leo," I said, my voice quiet but clear. "I'm looking for myself." I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I got in my car and I drove. I drove for hours until the city lights were far behind me and I was surrounded by the anonymity of the open highway. I ended up in a small coastal cottage in Maine, in a rented cottage that smelled of salt and pine. For the first few months, I did nothing. I sat on the porch and watched the ocean. I let the grief and the rage wash over me like the tides. I was a shipwreck. But even a shipwreck can become a foundation. One rainy afternoon, I was going through an old box of my things. I found a notebook I'd kept during the earliest days of Aethelgard. It was filled with my handwriting, financial projections, marketing ideas, logistical plans, ideas that Leo had taken and built upon. My ideas. The foundational code of Aethelgard wasn't just his, it was ours. And I had the proof, scribbled in this forgotten notebook. That was the ember, that tiny glowing spark in the ashes of my life. I looked at the generous check from the divorce, the blood money, and I made a decision. I wouldn't spend this money to live a quiet, comfortable life. I would use it as a weapon. I would use it to build my own empire, one that would stand in direct opposition to his. But how does a discarded wife with no recent work history take on a tech titan? She doesn't, not as herself. I needed a new identity, a new name, a new face to the world. I used a portion of the money to hire the best and most discreet professionals. A personal trainer who whipped my tired body back into strength, a stylist who cut my long, wifely hair into a sharp, sophisticated bob. I studied. I devoured business journals, tech reports, economic forecasts. I retaught myself everything I had known, and then I learned more. And I reached out to one person from my old life, Benjamin Carter. Ben was a brilliant, reclusive data scientist Leo had once tried and failed to recruit. He found him too difficult, too much of a purist. I had liked him instantly. We had stayed in touch with the occasional, harmless email. I called him. I told him everything. The betrayal, the humiliation, the NDA. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "Yelena," he said finally, his voice a low rumble, "what do you need?" "I need to build something, Ben. Something better than Aethelgard. I have the capital, I have the vision, and I have a score to settle." He chuckled, a dry sound. "I never liked Leo. Too much flash, not enough substance. What's the company called?" I looked out at the stormy ocean, at the waves crashing against the unyielding rocks. A name formed in my mind. A name of strength, resilience, and silent, inevitable force. I said, "Viridian. We're calling it Viridian." And so, in that quiet cottage by the sea, a phantom was born. Yelena, the abandoned wife, was gone. In her place was a determined, sharp, and fiercely intelligent woman with a single, burning purpose. I wasn't just going to move on. I was going to destroy the man who destroyed me. I was going to show Leo what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness and sacrifice for surrender. The hunt was on. They say living well is the best revenge, but they are wrong. The best revenge is living so well, so powerfully, that you become the nightmare your betrayer can't wake up from. And I was just getting started.
5 years. It's a long time in the life of a person. It's a lifetime in the world of tech. For 5 years, I was a ghost. Elena Rostova vanished from the social registers, from the gossip columns. She became a footnote in the glorious rise of Leo Thorne and Aethelgard. But in those 5 years, a different name began to whisper through the halls of power. A name spoken with curiosity, and then respect, and then a little bit of fear. Viridian. Building Viridian was like building a part of myself I never knew existed. Ben Carter was my rock, my co-conspirator. We worked out of a converted warehouse, fueled by coffee and a shared silent understanding of the mission. We didn't just want to compete with Aethelgard, we wanted to make it obsolete. Aethelgard's core product was a data analytics platform for big corporations. It was powerful, but it was also bloated, expensive, and, as I knew from the inside, built on some shaky early code foundations. My foundations. We decided to build something leaner, smarter, more intuitive. A platform that didn't just analyze data, but anticipated it. I used every ounce of knowledge I had from Aethelgard's early days. I knew its strength because I helped create them, and I knew its weaknesses because I had watched Leo ignore them in his rush for scale and glory. Viridian was designed to be everything Aethelgard was not: elegant, efficient, and ethically sound. We launched our first product to a skeptical market, but it was a masterpiece. Clean, powerful, and devastatingly effective. Our first major client was a rival of one of Aethelgard's biggest partners. The news sent a small shockwave through the industry. "Who is behind Viridian?" the headlines read. I kept myself carefully hidden. I was the mysterious CEO, known only as E. Rostova. I gave no interviews, I attended no galas. My image was a silhouette. The mystery fueled the legend. People speculated I was a reclusive genius from Silicon Valley, a European heiress, a former spy. No one ever guessed I was the discarded wife of the very man I was targeting. Meanwhile, I watched Leo from the shadows. Aethelgard was booming, but it was becoming arrogant. The quality of their updates was slipping. Their customer service was notorious. Leo was more focused on his public image, on his glamorous life with Isabella. They were the it couple of the tech world, splashed across every magazine. Every time I saw his photo, smiling next to her, a fresh wave of that cold, clean anger would wash over me, refueling my determination. The first real blow was a quiet one. The Department of Defense was looking for a new, secure data management partner. It was the contract of a lifetime. Athelgard was the clear frontrunner. They had the history, the name recognition. We, however, had the superior product, and we had something else. Impeccable security protocols that Ben had designed. Protocols so advanced they made Athelgard's system look like a child's toy. I personally led the pitch, remotely, my voice digitally altered just slightly. We presented a vision of security and efficiency that left the generals speechless. The day the news broke that Viridian had snatched the DoD contract from under Athelgard's nose was the day the tech world truly sat up and took notice. Athelgard's stock dipped for the first time in years. It was a small dip, but it was a crack, the first fissure in the mighty fortress. I was in my office, the Viridian headquarters now a gleaming, minimalist space that reflected my new, sharp-edged personality. Ben walked in, a rare full grin on his face. He handed me a tablet with the news headline. Viridian stuns industry, steals Athelgard's crown jewel contract. He's going to be furious, Ben said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. I didn't smile. I just looked at the headline. This wasn't about fury. This was about strategy. This was the first move in a long, intricate game of chess. Leo would now see Viridian as a threat. He would come for us. And that was exactly what I wanted. To make him look at me, to truly see the phantom he had created before I dismantled his world piece by piece. A few weeks later, an invitation arrived. It was for the annual Tech Innovation Gala, the most prestigious event in the industry. It was an event I would have attended on Leo's arm for years. Now I was invited in my own right, as E. Rostova, CEO of Viridian. Ben looked at me. "You're not going to go, are you? It's too soon. He'll be there." I looked at the embossed invitation. This was the moment. The phantom was ready to step into the light. "Oh, I'm going, Ben," I said, my voice calm. "It's time for a reunion." The night of the gala, I stood in front of a full-length mirror. I wore a dress of deep emerald green, Viridian's signature color. It was sleek, powerful, and utterly unlike anything the old Elena would have worn. My hair was sharp, my makeup flawless. I looked successful. I looked untouchable. I looked like his worst nightmare. The ballroom was a sea of familiar faces, the glitterati of the tech world, the same people who had smiled at me pityingly years ago. I made my entrance, a wave of whispers following me. "That's her. That's the CEO of Viridian. Who is she?" And then I saw him. Leo was across the room, holding a champagne flute, holding court. Isabella was clinging to his arm, laughing at something he said. He hadn't seen me yet. I took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. I walked calmly, deliberately through the crowd. The sea of people seemed to part for me. I walked directly towards him. He was mid-sentence, boasting about a new half-baked project Athelgard was launching to counter Viridian. Then his eyes landed on me. The change was instantaneous. His smile froze. His jaw went slack. The charming, confident mask shattered into a million pieces of pure, unadulterated shock. He looked at me, and for a moment, he didn't see the powerful CEO. He saw the ghost of his wife, returned from the dead, dressed for vengeance. The champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the sudden silence that had fallen around us. Everyone was staring. Isabella's smile was wiped away, replaced by a confused frown. I stopped in front of him. I allowed a small, cold smile to touch my lips. "Hello, Leo," I said. My voice carried perfectly in the hush. "It's been a long time. You're looking, well." He was pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He was completely, utterly destroyed. He couldn't form a single word. I raised my glass slightly, a tiny mocking toast. "To new beginnings," I said softly, just for him. And then I turned, and I walked away, leaving him standing in the wreckage of his own composure, surrounded by the whispers of the entire industry. The phantom had a face, and now the real game could begin. The first blow had been struck, not in a boardroom, but in a ballroom. He knew my face now. He knew the threat was personal. But what he didn't know was that this was just the beginning. The abandoned wife was back, and she was just getting warmed up.
Seeing the shock on Leo's face was sweeter than I had ever imagined. But sweetness is a fleeting sensation. What followed was a cold, brutal business war. And war, I had learned, is won not by emotion, but by ruthless strategy. The gala was the shot heard round the business world. The next day, every financial and tech outlet was running the story. Mystery CEO revealed. Viridian's mastermind is Elena Rostova, ex-wife of Ethelgard's Leo Thorne. Revenge of the abandoned wife? Corporate divorce gets ugly. The narrative was irresistible. I was no longer just a business rival. I was a scorned woman on a quest for vengeance. The public ate it up. Our brand recognition skyrocketed. Ethelgard's stock began a slow, steady decline. Trust, that most fragile of business commodities, was bleeding out of his company. Leo, predictably, did not take it well. His first move was aggression. He launched a smear campaign, planting stories about my instability, my lack of formal qualifications, suggesting Viridian's success was a fluke built on stolen ideas. It was a pathetic, transparent attempt. My response was silence. I let the market speak for me. We unveiled Viridian's next-generation platform, a thing of such beauty and power that it rendered Ethelgard's flagship product look ancient. We poached 3 of his top engineers, not with bigger paychecks, but with a more compelling vision and a leader they actually respected. His second move was legal. Ethelgard's lawyers hit us with a frivolous lawsuit, claiming intellectual property theft, pointing to my old notebooks as proof I had taken proprietary information. This was the move I had been waiting for. This was the trap. I assembled my legal team, the best money could buy. But we didn't just play defense. We went on the offensive. We countersued for defamation and frivolous litigation. And we had a secret weapon. Remember the non-disclosure agreement? The one that was supposed to silence me forever? My lawyers found a loophole. A big one. It prevented me from disclosing trade secrets, but it did not prevent me from defending myself against false accusations. And in his panic, Leo had accused me of the one thing I could definitively disprove. The court case became a media circus. The day I took the stand was the day I planned to end him. Leo's lawyer, a smug, condescending man, tried to paint me as a bitter, vengeful woman. Ms. Rostova, isn't it true that this entire company, Viridian, is nothing more than an elaborate act of revenge against your ex-husband? I looked directly at the jury, then at Leo, who was sitting at the defendant's table, looking haggard and angry. Revenge is an emotional concept, I said, my voice clear and calm, echoing in the silent courtroom. I am building a business. There is a difference. My ex-husband seems to have forgotten that. He also seems to have forgotten the terms of our partnership. I then directed my lawyers to enter into evidence my old notebooks, the ones filled with my ideas, my calculations, my early designs for the very system Ethelgard was built on. I explained, point by point, how my contributions were not just supportive, but foundational. I showed diagrams I had drawn, lines of pseudocode I had written, marketing strategies I had devised. Leo watched, his face growing paler with each exhibit. He was being exposed not as a thief, but as something worse in the business world, a man who took credit for the work of others, a man who had built his legacy on the silent labor of his partner and then discarded her. His lawyer's case crumbled. The judge dismissed Ethelgard's lawsuit with prejudice. The countersuit, however, was just beginning. The legal victory was a tsunami. Ethelgard's board of directors, who had tolerated Leo's arrogance as long as the stock price was high, were now in a state of panic. Major investors began to pull out. The company was facing massive legal fees from our countersuit and a shareholder revolt. The final blow came from an unexpected quarter, Isabella. With the empire cracking, the equal partner showed her true colors. She gave a tell-all interview to a popular magazine, portraying herself as a victim, manipulated by the powerful Leo, unaware of the true extent of his dealings with me. She was saving herself, throwing him under the bus to protect her own brand. The betrayal was poetic. It was perfect. I was in my office, watching the financial news on a large screen. The ticker on the bottom showed Ethelgard's stock in freefall. ATHG, minus 45%. It was a bloodbath. My phone rang. It was a number I hadn't seen in years, but I recognized it instantly. It was Leo's private line. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. I didn't say anything. I just waited. His voice came through, broken, defeated. It was a shadow of the confident, booming voice I remembered. "Elena, please?" I remained silent. "You've won," he whispered, the words clearly costing him everything. "You've destroyed me. The board, they're forcing me out. I'm going to lose everything. Please, call off the dogs. Stop the countersuit. I'm begging you." I looked out the window of my Viridian office at the city sprawling below me, the same city where I had once been a ghost. Now, I was one of its rulers. "Begging is beneath you, Leo," I said, my voice devoid of malice but also of mercy. It was simply a statement of fact. You made your choices years ago. You taught me a very valuable lesson in business and in life. There are consequences. You are now facing yours. I could hear him breathing heavily, on the verge of tears, the great Leo Thorne brought to his knees. "What was it you said to me?" I continued, almost conversationally. Yes, you said, 'I hope you find happiness, Elena. I truly do.' Well, I have. It's amazing how happiness finds you when you stop building castles for other people and start building your own." I didn't wait for a response. I ended the call. I turned back to the screen. Ethelgard stock hit a trading halt. News alerts flashed. Ethelgard CEO Leo Thorne resigns effective immediately. Company enters emergency restructuring. It was over. The empire was fallen. The king was dethroned. I felt quiet. There was no triumphant cheer, no manic laughter. There was just a profound, deep silence. The cold fire of revenge that had burned in my chest for 5 years had finally consumed its fuel. It was gone, and in its place was peace. Ben walked in, his expression a mix of awe and concern. "Are you okay?" I nodded slowly. "It's done. I had my revenge. I had exposed him, humiliated him, and broken the company that was his pride and joy. But as I sat there in the silence of my victory, a new question began to form in my mind, a question more terrifying than any I had faced in my fight against Leo. Now that the monster was slain, what was the hero to do? They say revenge is a dish best served cold, and it's true, the colder it is, the clearer the taste. But what no one tells you is that once you finish the meal, you're left with an empty plate, and you have to ask yourself, was the feast worth the hunger? The battle was over, but the war for my own soul was just beginning.
What is the price of a soul? For 5 years, I had mortgaged mine to the cause of vengeance. Every waking moment, every business decision, every breath was filtered through the lens of hurting Leo. And now that I had succeeded, I was left standing in the quiet aftermath, looking at the woman I had become. She was powerful. She was successful. But was she me? The months that followed the fall of Ethelgard were a strange, anticlimactic time. Viridian was now the undisputed leader in the market. I was celebrated as a visionary, a disruptor, a feminist icon who had taken down the patriarchal titan. The interviews I finally granted were filled with softball questions about female empowerment and overcoming adversity. I gave them the sound bites they wanted, but the words felt hollow in my mouth. I had everything I thought I wanted, more money that I could ever spend, power, respect, but the house I lived in was still empty. The silence was still there. The ghost of the old Elena had been replaced by the monument of E. Rostova, CEO. I found myself drawn back to the cottage in Maine. I needed the ocean again. I needed to hear the waves, to remember the woman who had sat on that porch, broken and lost, before she became a weapon. One afternoon, my assistant called. "Miss Rostova, there's a package for you. It's from him." My first instinct was cold fury. Was he trying to taunt me? To send some final pathetic message? I almost told her to throw it away. But curiosity, that most human of frailties, got the better of me. It was a small, simple cardboard box, no return address. Inside, there was no note, just a single old faded photograph. It was a picture of Leo and me, in that tiny apartment. We were both laughing, caught in a moment of pure, unguarded joy. We were sharing that single cup of noodles. You could see the love, the hope, the shared dream shining in our young, foolish eyes. I sat down hard. The photo felt like a physical blow. It wasn't a weapon. It was a mirror. It showed me the two people we had been before the betrayal, before the revenge, before the poison had seeped into our story. I didn't cry. I just stared at that picture for a long, long time. And I realized something. In my quest to destroy the man who betrayed me, I had also destroyed the memory of the man I had once loved. I had let the betrayal define our entire history, erasing all the good that had come before it. My revenge was complete, but it was also a failure. It had not healed me. It had not brought back what I lost. It had simply created a new kind of emptiness. A few weeks later, I was in New York for a charity fundraiser. It was the kind of event the old Elena would have loved, planning every detail. As I was leaving, a figure emerged from the shadows near my car. I tensed, ready for a fight. It was Leo. He looked ordinary. He had lost weight. His suit was expensive, but hung loosely on him. The arrogant glow was gone from his eyes, replaced by a weary humility I had never seen before. "Alina," he said, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to fight. I wanted to see you, to talk." My bodyguard moved forward, but I waved him back. I nodded for Leo to continue. "I got a job," he said, a faint, self-deprecating smile on his face. "A teaching job at a community college. Intro to business." I was speechless. Leo Thorne, the tech titan, teaching at a community college? "It's humbling," he admitted, his gaze dropping for a moment before meeting mine again. "And it's the best thing I've done in years. I look at those kids with their big dreams and their empty pockets. It reminds me of us, of who I used to be." He took a deep breath. "I sent you that picture because I needed you to know that I remember him too. That young, stupid, hopeful man who loved you more than anything. I became someone I'm ashamed of. Arrogant, greedy, blind. I betrayed you. I destroyed the best thing in my life. And I am so sorry, Elena. Not because you ruined me, but because I deserved it." He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't asking for anything. He was just stating a fact, offering a truth. I looked at him, this broken man standing in the dim light, and I felt the last remnants of my hatred dissolve.
It didn't vanish in a blaze of glory, but faded away like a mist under the morning sun. There was no love left, not a spark, but there was no hate either. There was just pity and a strange, distant sense of closure. "The world is a better place with Viridian in it," he said softly. "You built something good, Alina. Something truly good. I'm proud of you." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing back into the night.